Well, I would say that a big change in the European Union strategy towards Africa in general, and of course towards the Sahel, is due to the fact that we defined a specific tool called the Global Gateway, by which we invest 150 billion euro in Africa, 72% regarding in particular sub-Saharan Africa, to increase our partnership through a new vision based on the fact that we need to be more investing in infrastructure, for instance, in digitalization, of course, everything that is connected to a progress that can be really sustainable, so education and all the rest. This is to respond to the huge challenges that are affecting Africa in general and in particular the Sahel, which is probably the most difficult region at the moment, with many coup d'etat and many problems related to security. In this way, most probably the European Union will be able to be even more effective, being the main partner of Africa and the countries of the Sahel in particular, and especially making its interventions more sustainable. I have been talking to the Department of State of the US at the moment, with which I have cooperated very proficuously during the last 3 years. I would say that most probably the foreign policy will not change drastically regarding certain, let's say, general directions that the US have always taken. Certainly, the election of Trump has been very much welcomed by the countries of most countries of Africa, because it is, of course, promoting an idea of countries and especially profile of national interest that reflects the idea that is promoted at the moment, for instance, in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and similar countries. That is the fact that sovereignty is an important principle in policy, that of course national interests are particularly relevant. So I think that more than really touching the general attitude towards Africa, I think the impact comes in terms of national discourses of single countries in Africa. I think, nevertheless, that because the European Union, as I mentioned, is the main partner of each country of the Sahel, for instance, of course, we will continue in our policy based on humanitarian aid and development cooperation. And this will also be welcomed by the countries of Africa and the Sahel in particular, because it is essential and it is a unique feature of the European Union. I always say that for me, after having spent 40 years on field in conflict areas, human rights are the biggest challenge of this century. Why do I say so? Because human rights is politics. Human rights is a political statement. It's not only a concern for, of course, philanthropy or to affirm the need to protect certain communities. It's a universal value that I wonder why is not at the moment a priority by many countries in the world, but it is in fact the only thing that reflects the idea that we are really, as human beings, all equal at global level. The problem is how to talk about human rights, because of course we as European Union are very worried about the violations of human rights. We always mention them. We are fighting a battle against violations of human rights. We repeat this, and I also do it with the heads of states in Africa as well as with civil society, that human rights are fundamental. But the problem now is how to pass the message that human rights are politics, that are convenient even for the most, let's say, restrictive leaderships, because they can lessen tensions in society, and then for the leadership it's easier to communicate with even the most remote areas. They can bring progress. They are a catalyst of development, and therefore let's say that I find that to render human rights a priority again at global level, we need to change our narrative and make sure that they are accepted as a universal value that is profitable and from which people can benefit. Very difficult. It's a very difficult challenge, I have to say, also because many countries often tell me, Emanuela, don't talk about human rights with the African countries. And this is really very racist, I find. And because it's not necessary, they don't like it, so don't talk about it. I think I will do always the contrary. I have to say that the G20 has changed very recently under the presidency of India, because India invited the African Union to join the G20. This means that we have 54 more countries participating to the G20 under the leadership, of course, of the African Union that unites them all. This is a huge change, and this means also that India has strong ambitions as leader of the Global South. I think that because of this new presence, probably the themes and the arguments that will be at the center of the meeting will be more global, especially now that it is needed to decide what are we going to do with this planet, in the sense that there are many pressures for nationalisms, very strong sovereignty discourses, and therefore how can we continue to concentrate on efficient multilateralism, on which I always concentrate very much in my political discourse, to make sure that at least on some very fundamental issues, including economic development, human rights and other things, we find some form of consensus. And we realize that although we can concentrate on our internal affairs, we cannot live on our own, like John Donne when he was saying no man is an island in itself, but actually realize the importance of interdependence and interconnection that are inevitable, and for which we have to find common solutions.